Welcome to the Minnesota American Legion Patriots podcast. I'm Mike Perry, host. We're coming to you live from the Outlook Bar and Grill in Maple Grove. This is a major event that we're going to be talking about today. We're talking the Minnesota legislative session. We're going to be talking specifically about gambling. It's so very important to so many millions of people throughout the state of Minnesota. With me is my co-host, Christy Janico, also the chair of the legislative committee for the American Legion Department of Minnesota. Christy, we have some guests lined up for this afternoon. Tell us about it.
First, I'd like to introduce my friend, Rachel Jenner from Allied Charities of Minnesota. So Rachel, go ahead and wave. I'm also here with Chris Baker. He is the president of the Maple Grove Fire Relief Association and a firefighter here in Maple Grove. And we're also joined by the owner of the Lookout, who's one of our deputy fire chiefs, Mike Canan, of Maple Grove Fire Rescue. So he'll be joining us as well. We're all excited to be here.
You bet. And of course, we're going to be talking, as I mentioned, about legislative issues and specifically gambling. And Christy, where I'd like to see us start here is let's take a look at an overview of the last 3, 4, 5 years, specifically electronic gambling, e-tabs. What's happened? What created this last minute, behind closed doors decision making without any input from the public decisions in this tax bill that created the issue that we're going to talk about today? So I'll let you and Rachel take it from here.
Yeah, so first I'd like to just say that there's about 190 American Legion posts across the state of Minnesota that do have charitable gambling operations. Over the past few years, we've really seen e-gambling take off. I know my post, Osseo Maple Grove Post 172, maybe in the past year just saw a massive increase in the revenues from e-gambling compared to other sources. And so I'll kick it over to Rachel to talk about kind of the history since e-gambling was legalized in Minnesota back in 2012 to pay for the U.S. Bank Stadium.
Thank you, Christy. Mike, thanks for having us. So e-gaming first came into existence in 2012, and over the past few years, there have been some court challenges trying to clarify whether or not these games mimic a slot machine, what features maybe have gone too far in the interpretation of the Gambling Control Board as they've approved the games. So this year, the tax bill rolled out. We were there seeking tax relief for the 1,100 charities who conduct charitable gambling in Minnesota. And unfortunately, what happened was that bill was amended at the 11th hour. Some new language was parachuted in to restrict the games and take away things like the open all feature, the bonus games, free play, things of that nature. So we, because it came at the 11th hour, we didn't have the opportunity to testify, to go through the normal legislative process where they roll out the bill, there's a fiscal note, all of the information that we would need to know whether or not this is a good bill. And I think a lot of legislators, unfortunately, were duped in that process. I know Rep. Gomez stood on the floor of the House and said, this is only going from a 1 to a 4 button push, and that's all this legislation does. But at the 11th hour, that legislation changed and was amended, and despite our efforts to push back on that and get it removed, it passed as part of the omnibus tax bill. So now we are trying to educate everyone as to what these changes are and what they will bring to the electronic gambling industry. Currently, electronic pull tabs are more than half of the revenue in charitable gambling in Minnesota. So any change to these games that reduces the amount of income that charities bring in is going to have a big impact. Last year, we donated $131 million and we paid $180 million in taxes. So these are big numbers. Electronic gambling this year, I believe, will exceed $300 million in revenue, and that's the dollars deposited by the charities. So it's even a 10% impact is, $30 million that we're talking about. And the minute that you take away features like the open all and the bonus play, and you simplify the games, we run the risk of those games slow down. You can't play as many games as you could before. Maybe they're not as fun, and players will choose not to play them. We don't know exactly what is going to happen with the changes that these games are going to have.
One of the analogies that I like to use about the changes in these games is that you're telling me as a millennial that I have to go from playing high-definition graphic computer games to an Atari type game. Is that an accurate comparison?
That is. Trying to simplify the games to the point where they're not as fun and as successful is what we're concerned about. And that's exactly it. It limits our future, limits the future of what the games can develop, because technology is going to continue to evolve, and game graphics and features are going to continue to evolve. And this legislation really tries to severely restrict what our games can be and what they can look like, and that's just going to hurt our future.
Rachel, let me ask you this. I mean, you talk about disappointment that folks have. I guess I'm disappointed in some of the legislators that we talked to that said that they would never do anything to harm or change veterans,
right,
or any of the people that were receiving benefits from e-gaming. That's got to be disappointing for you and your organization as well. I mean, I'm talking about Senator Nick Friends, Senator Aaron Murphy, just a couple, Representative Zach Stevenson. I mean, what a disappointment. They tell you to your face that they will not do anything to hurt, but yet this bill has and will as it takes effect.
Definitely, and I think that also speaks again to the process that this bill went through and how it was brought in at the 11th hour. A lot of the legislators I truly feel don't understand what this language does or how severely it could impact the games. So I think we've got to educate them this session, and we've got to work with them to try to bring it back. Taking rid of bonus games and free play, those are features that have existed since the beginning, since those first games in 2012. And the agreement that was made in 2012 was that electronic games would be allowed to have the same features that paper games have, and that these would not be a slot machine, they would be an electronic version of a pull tab. And paper pull tabs have free play, they have bonus games. There's a game where you can continue to pull windows, and as long as you don't hit a stop sign, you continue to open those windows. That's free play. Every time I get to open a new window with a chance to win is a free play or a bonus play. So this is new language. It's not a clarification of 2012 language. Taking away bonus games and free play is new legislation.
Okay, so let me ask another question here. So people listening, in their minds, I'm believing they're saying, why would the legislators do something that would harm people? Literally take funding away from food shelves, police and fire, veterans,
youth sports.
Where has this all come from? What's the catalyst?
The catalyst was the court cases that have appeared over the last few years by the Shakopee, Midwakett, and Sioux, who brought a case against the state of Minnesota, specifically the Gambling Control Board, claiming that the games were mimicking a slot machine, that they were infringing on their exclusivity with slot machines. And both of those cases were lost by the Midwakett and Sioux, and it went to the Court of Appeals in 2022. And the Court of Appeals didn't rule that the games mimicked a slot machine. In fact, the ruling stated that the mere push of a button is far too attenuated to mimic a slot machine. We're basically splitting hairs at this point to say that pushing a button on a iPad is equivalent to playing a slot machine. But what they did find was that the Gambling Control Board had made rules and sent out emails, and that was not a proper rulemaking process. And so the state needs to go back and look at how that rulemaking process is being done. But I think what was sold to the legislators this year was that because of this Court of Appeals case, they needed to clarify the language, that the language was maybe ambiguous, although the court also stated that the Gambling Control Board had used reasonable discretion in their interpretation. So there's some gray area there. But that is, I think, the catalyst and what drove the legislation this session. And unfortunately, now we're here in this position where we've got to try to defend our games, and we've got 18 months to work on this issue before the games have to come out of play. So that's what we'll be doing over the next 18 months, is working to make this right.
So where does an organization like yours go to now? Are you in the process of informing? Are you doing things such as town halls? Where does the ACM go from here?
Yeah, we are, over the next 6 to 12 months, we will be running town halls throughout the state of Minnesota, meeting with legislators to educate them on our industry, on the benefits of charitable gambling, all the things that we support. I try to make the case, and I want to continue to educate all Minnesotans, that even if you don't play pull tabs, you are affected by charitable gambling dollars in your community. Like you said, whether, youth sports, civic things like park playgrounds, fire relief associations, all of these organizations are raising funds that are vital to the communities that they support. So we need to make people aware of that and how important it is. And then we also need to make them aware that this legislation was an overreach and that we need to go back and make it right.
All right, sounds good. Christy, any comments?
Yeah, I mean, as I think about this, I think we've talked about definitely there are winners and losers in this process. I know I remember trying to get to different sessions of the conference committee that you and I could keep tabs on what was happening.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for us to get there and to understand what the lawmakers were discussing. And in the end, it seems like what happened was not favorable to many charities across Minnesota. So can you talk a little bit more about the disparities that might have been created from now these changes?
So I think, in talking about picking winners and losers, we have always been a proponent that the casinos have their games, we want them to be successful, and we want to have our games and be successful in using them to support our communities and our causes. So I think legislators tried to step up this year and give us some tax relief. It was minor tax relief, just 1 to 2% in rates that range from 9 to 36% currently. So it's a small percentage. Equates to about $15 million annually. The other thing that they did was that they capped the manufacturer game fees at 25% to try to reduce our costs there. And while that's helpful, again, even a 10% loss in revenue of $30 million will not be offset by these sorts of changes. It's going to take a lot larger reduction in our tax rates for us to see a benefit. And, the manufacturers and distributors are going to work hard to create new games, to try to put out the best product that they can. But we want to make sure that legislators understand that electronic gambling is part of the future of charitable gambling, and we need to be included in that because of the great causes that are supported with gambling.
For sure.
All right. Well, it's great having you here.
Thank you.
Let's move on. Let's talk to an outlet, a gambling outlet, an organization that does things with that money. Christy?
Yeah, so now I'd like to kick this over to the Maple Grove Fire Relief Association. I believe this right here, the Lookout, is your only gambling location. So go ahead and talk a little bit about your operation.
Yeah, it is our only site of operation, has been our only site of operation since, I believe, March of 1987. Mike just had his 35-year anniversary. My name is Chris Baker. I'm a captain with the Maple Grove Fire Department and the president of the Maple Grove Fire Relief Association. I'll let Mike introduce himself really quick.
I'm Mike Canan. I own the Lookout Bar and Grill and also the assistant fire chief for the city of Maple Grove. So, relief member too, obviously.
So, I've been on the fire department for 19 years. Like I said, Mike just had his 35th anniversary, so he's a long timer. We've had those pull tabs behind the booth there since '87. Before that, it was the dances and things of that nature, pancake breakfast, things like that, to help fund the major needs of the fire department, right? Whether it's equipment or life safety supplies and things of that nature. Our primary mission as a relief association is to manage the firefighter pensions that are at the end, therefore the end of our firefighter service time. That's our primary function. We take state and city money that is contributed on behalf of each firefighter service and invest that and manage that pension for them. So this is really just an add-on. So like many fire departments, just being a firefighter isn't enough, so we want to get involved in community activities and we want to do things to even further help our community. The primary usage of the money in the beginning was life safety equipment and paying for parts of trucks and things like that. But then, pull tabs come in, the city gets bigger, more of a tax base, and does a really good job with capital replacement planning for the next truck 20 years down the road when we have to replace it and things like that. So now we have these extra funds to do more philanthropic things or support youth sports and things of that nature. So that's what we've tried to do, and ETABS has helped us with that. In the beginning in 2012, it wasn't so great. We weren't sure how this was going to go and if it was going to be a long-term viable option. The state wasn't sure either. Because this was supposed to help fund U.S. Bank Stadium, and now here we are paying it off 23 years early. So that's, in a nutshell, what we do with it. Last year we donated, one second while I look it up. Last year we donated $168,944 back to our community, fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022.
So let me ask you a quick question here. What happens when that money goes away?
That's a really good question. As of this year, fiscal year to date, through our May 31st report, our ETAB net receipts was $472,252. Obviously there's taxes in there, which is the biggest benefactor of our net receipts, unfortunately. Rent and things like that. It's 49% of our revenue. 49% of our revenue in a year at this time comes from ETABS. Last year was 42%. So obviously we're in a growth mode. When you cut that off and reduce that, we're going to have less money to give away. I think at best, we're going to see potentially up to a 62% decrease. If we go back to our numbers from 2012, when the games weren't that interesting, they weren't that fun to play, they were a little boring, the type of revenue, dollars that we were putting through leads me to believe we're going to go right back to that period. Yeah. And the tax committee said, oh, well, done this tax relief to, cover a 10% reduction. Well, a 10% reduction is completely different than a 62% reduction. So I have some big concerns. That means less life-saving equipment. That means less money to youth sports, less money to veterans organizations, and people that really need it.
Mike, I got to ask you, what does that mean to your place right here, the Lookout Bar and Grill?
Well, I'll first start out with, Chris talks about youth hockey and sports and all that stuff, but I'm on the committee for that too, and I'm with Maple Grove Lions, and we use a lot of that money to help people, get vans when they get in accidents or if they have cancer or whatever. I mean, it stays right in our community, the money, and it helps out individuals that need money at that time, along with the sports and all that stuff. But it has an impact right in our own communities. And, here in Maple Grove, that's awesome. But when you talk about bars and stuff up in Hibbing and whatever, statewide, it has a massive impact on their business and the local community. So it's, when you talk statewide, it's a lot of money and a lot of people that are impacted on a daily basis. What has it done here for, to answer your question, at the bar? I think it keeps people here longer. It gives us more generation of revenue from obviously rent, but people hanging out and spending a little bit more time in the business, and tipping my staff. So if they win, they tip my staff, which helps the local economy of my staff members and bringing money back to them. I think going backwards would be a travesty at this point.
Yeah, and you and I have some common recipients of our charitable donations. So over at the Osseo Maple Grove American Legion, we donate to cross services. I know that you guys have as well. These are folks in some serious need. These are people who might be the working poor. They really need this extra little boost to help them make their monthly needs. So personally, that's my why. I'm very concerned about the people in need in my community, and I feel like it's going to make our jobs harder supporting the people who need it the most.
So, being a Maple Grove Lion too, and Maple Grove Fire Relief Association, I mean, every year we do our food baskets, and we put together about $25,000 in joint funds from our gambling association to do food baskets, and you would think that needs food baskets in Maple Grove. We're in Maple Grove. You'd be shocked how many people are requesting food services and food baskets and stuff right here in our own hometown, and it's kind of eye-opening.
Rachel, let me ask you this. With all this being said, what is the possibility of a 50, 60, 70% decline with the changes to electronic poll tabs? Is there, I've heard bold side, well, we don't know because we're not there yet.
Yeah.
But yet still we have a source that's bringing in, $40 million to pay off the stadium and everything.
Right. Yeah, that is the big question that we all have in this. And as I've talked to game manufacturers, I've heard 20 to 60%. Now that the language came out, I think, they're leaning towards it's probably a 30 to 50% reduction. Just the open all feature they felt would be a 20% reduction, because having to press a button 3 or 4 times versus once, it just slows down the play. So if you slow down the play, that's less revenue coming in. But now that we know that it's, eliminating bonus and free play, it could be more like a, 30 to 50% reduction. And I think a lot of that's going to come down to the players. So we've got to be, at our local bars and restaurants, encouraging them to continue to play, encouraging them to continue to support their communities. And like I said, we're meeting with game manufacturers now to talk about what can we do, how can we make these the best games. And the good news is that these game manufacturers are all really committed to Minnesota and to our marketplace, and they are going to keep with us at this point and really work to bring the best games that they can. So
Well, I know it's early on, but
cautiously optimistic.
yeah, it's early on. All this takes effect at what time?
The new games have to comply August 1st of 2023. So once August 1st comes, all the new games that are being brought to market will have to have these features. The current games can stay in play up until December 31st of 2024. So,
Okay, so really, what we're looking at is a time period where food shelves, those that are helped, police and fire, youth sports, we're in this phase of about 12 months
right,
where they won't feel a thing.
right,
But then all of a sudden, reality
yes,
sets in,
yep,
and we can't forget about this.
Yeah.
The citizens need to realize that organizations like the Lookout Bar and Grill, fire departments, police departments, American Legions are all at that point where they're thinking, what are we going to cut out?
right,
And in our local communities, what are we going to be able to say to that family that has 4 kids that can't afford to send them to hockey or baseball?
Right.
What are we going to do, Christy, with the American Legion baseball program?
I know.
I mean, this is a reality that some way, shape, or form, through a cooperation, we need to get this message out to people.
yep. We need to make sure that people are educated, that they're talking to their legislators and their candidates for office to say, will you support us? Will you work with us to make this right? And that's, what we've got to spend the next 12 months doing, so that when the 2024 election comes, we know that those being elected are going to support Minnesota charities and all Minnesotans, really.
All right. What else we got, Christy? Anything else we need to discuss?
Anything from you guys?
I just kind of. So I think that's the big thing. I think you hit a couple of key topics there. This is the time period where we have to go to work, right? And I know as an organization, we've already started to try to formulate. We aren't a collective bargaining unit. We're not a union. We're just an organization that wants to do good, right? So we want to be careful about the things that we say and the things that we do, and things like that. But we're trying to be careful about how we craft a message to say to not only benefactors this year and ongoing, hey, just have the awareness that we're able to give this money because of the programs that we have in place. And those programs might be going away and we might not be able to. And that question that gets asked, what are we going to do? Where are we going to cut? We don't have a good answer for that right now. Our kind of main mission as a board, we have an elected 6-member board for from our Firefighters Relief Association. We always try to do the most good for the most amount of people. So we'll probably continue to do that. That's what firefighters do. When you cut, we say, oh, well, we'll make it work because that's what we do. So we will continue to make it work, but just how far we're going to be able to stretch things is the major question at this point.
Right. Any final comments, Mike?
No, I just, I'll stress again, it has a major impact economically on the businesses, the employees that work at the businesses, and the sellers of the e-tabs, and beyond that, the local people that we donate to. I mean, as a Maple Grove Fire Relief Association member, yes, we'll make it work, Chris, but rather than giving somebody $1,000 for that wheelchair, it may be $200.
Yeah, right.
So making it work isn't as effective, let's just say. But we'll have to do what we have to do if that's the path they force us to take.
All right. Folks, it's been great. Wow. What a kickoff here for the...
Time went by fast.
Yes, it sure did. I want to thank you all for taking time to be with us today on the Patriots podcast. We're going to continue covering some events when it comes to charitable gambling because it affects, I want to say, what did I think? 192 American Legion posts throughout the entire state of Minnesota. And that's why we're so into making sure everybody understands just what's happening on electronic pull tabs and e-gaming, gambling, charitable gambling. So again, thank you all for being with us here. You've been listening to the Minnesota American Legion Patriots podcast, a legislative wrap-up. Down the road, we'll be talking with people like Protect Our Charities. Keith, we're going to stop over at Frankie's one of these days and see what that group of folks over there have to say. And who knows, we might be in your hometown as long as Christy hangs in with me, and I'm sure she will. Again, Mike Perry, along with my co-host, Christy Janico. Have yourself a great day.